words. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Lisa Macaluso, Managing Director of Juvenile Justice for Case Commons, and I'm so excited to moderate this session today. We have three amazing community-based program leaders who will share their program models for providing detention alternative supports to pre-adjudicated youth within a broad community-centered framework that provides supports and engagement opportunities to all kids, to families, and to communities. The webinar will focus on how these programs are managing through the fluid and continuing COVID experience. By sharing their journeys and lessons learned, we hope to start a conversation about the critical importance of one of the most basic tenets of JDAI, the existence of strong and trusted community-based detention alternative programs during COVID-19 and beyond. Our discussion will continue on JDAIconnect, so remember to check back there after the webinar for additional materials, to share your own experiences, to ask questions of the presenters that we might not get to in the hour we have, and of course, to always be talking and asking questions of each other. So before I introduce today's speakers, let's take a poll of who's in attendance. Beth, can you please pull the poll up?
Lisa, your wish is my command. Here we go. I've just launched the poll. There you go. Can you see it?
I can see it. So for the attendees, please share the area of the youth justice system field you represent. If you work in the courts or in the juvenile justice system itself, that would be the first bullet. If you're a community-based practitioner or service provider, second bullet. If you're a community advocate, that would be bullet 3. If you're a JDI coordinator, bullet 4. If you're a program funder or work for a program funder, that would be bullet 5. And if you don't fit any of those categories, you're another.
Lisa, this is a very Zoom tech-savvy crowd. Of our
they jumped right on.
Of our 168, 69 participants thus far, we have an 81% have voted. So you just let me know when you want me to end it and share the results.
Let's give it 2 more seconds here.
I think everybody's getting to know Zoom and they know how to vote, and appreciate everybody.
The standard operating procedure for Zoom.
Yeah, people have gotten pretty good at it.
Awesome.
So
okay,
I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, share the results. Here we go. You should be able to see them now, Liz.
All right, thank you so much. So it looks like we have the most court and system people joining us today, followed by the community-based practitioner and service provider group, followed by the JDI coordinators, and then the other group, and then the community advocates and program funders. So thank you all so much for participating in the poll and the standard operating procedure. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. So let us meet today's panelists. First up is Dr. Cassidy Higgins. Cassidy, do you want to open up your video? There you are. Cassidy is the Vice President of Community Impact at Fresh Lifelines for Youth, or FLY, an organization working with youth in the San Francisco Bay Area to disrupt and dismantle the pipeline to prison. Welcome, Cassidy. Can you tell us more about the FLY program and also describe your program's connection to pre-adjudicated youth?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for the introduction, Lisa. It's so nice to be here speaking with you all today. So FLY works in 3 San Francisco Bay Area counties. And in addition to direct service, we also offer technical assistance and we engage in systems change work. So in addition to working with young people directly on the ground, we partner with them to really inform the ways in which our systems need to become more just and humane and responsive to young people involved in them. So we have 6 different program models serving middle school, high school, and transition-aged youth up to the age of 25. And our programs are a combination of interventions, including law-related education, where we help young people understand the law and their rights within that law. We also offer case management and coaching through paid staff for young people who want to dive in and work toward goals. And then we leverage mentoring. And so we have a huge base of volunteers who either teach our law-related education or partner one-on-one and mentor youth. And then we also have pro-social events and civic engagement, opportunities where young people get to act like kids and also get to grow in their social skills, their social emotional learning skills. We serve both youth who are involved in the justice system, and we do also serve pre-adjudicated youth in response to community needs for prevention and early intervention services. And in order to do that, we really rely on leveraging our system and community partnerships while centering youth voice in anything that we do.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. Next up is Mr. Matt Reed. Matt, please open your video. Matt joins us from Louisville, Kentucky. He is currently the Executive Director of YMCA Safe Place Services, a social services branch of the YMCA of Greater Louisville, where he has served in various roles for 20 years. Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can you share more about YMCA Safe Place and also describe your program's connection to serving pre-adjudicated youth?
Absolutely. It's great to be with everyone and very excited to spend some time today talking about our programs at Safe Place. YMCA Safe Place has actually been around since about 1974. We initially opened up as a youth shelter and continue on today to being our community's only 24-hour emergency youth shelter for young people that are in crisis. It's the only program where youth can actually self-refer themselves to our program. Our vision for young people we serve is that all youth and young adults in our community are protected, respected, empowered, and valued. And we believe wholeheartedly in that through the way that we attempt to deliver our services. Some of you all may be familiar with the yellow and black sign. Hopefully, many of you have seen that in your community. And I'll start there as one of the 4 programs I'll share about. Our outreach program called Project Safe Place is a very simple model and has been replicated in over 1,000 communities in 40 states across the country. It was actually started here in Louisville in 1983. A safe place sign throughout a community really means it's a front door to services for young people that are in crisis. And that's been a signature way that we have supported and helped youth for many years. Let me talk about our 2 other programs, and then I'll talk specifically about Shelter House and our alternative to detention programs. In addition to those programs, we operate a drop-in center for young adults that are homeless, ages 18 to 24. It's the fastest growing segment of our homeless population in our community. We were the first organization to open up a drop-in center specific to that population. Goals within that program are certainly around advocacy if they are justice involved, but primarily focusing on housing, basic needs support, and through a learning lab that we have, we work on employment and education opportunities. We also operate a mentoring program for middle school youth who all share a common factor, and that is that they have an incarcerated parent. And that's called the Why Now mentoring program. Why Now is a 10-month intensive program that aligns youth and a mentor over those 10 months. And they follow a proven curriculum around the very simple idea of breaking the cycle of incarceration. This program is a national model, and we're very proud of its results. We have 94% of our Why Now graduates that we begin with in middle school have gone on to graduate high school on time. And throughout the course of Why Now, we not only support them in the 10 months, but also through high school. And at the end of high school graduation, they have opportunities to earn scholarships. So let me get into our Shelter House program, which is our residential program at Safe Place. We receive a number of youth that are not justice involved that may come to us for abuse and runaway and other types of issues that may be going on in the home. But about 10 years ago, we opened up Shelter House to the idea that it could become an alternative to detention, primarily focusing on how could we support young people who are maybe just on the cusp or just beginning to get involved in the justice system. And we started off with what's called our field release program. And what field release does is it provides a responding officer or law enforcement the opportunity to bring a young person to us who may have committed a misdemeanor, or let's just say a non-detainable offense, because some of those also include felonies. But if for any reason that an officer or our court designated workers who often consult with the officers feel that it's maybe unsafe, or maybe potentially they can't get a hold of a parent or a guardian, they have the option to bring that young person to our program at Shelter House, where we can kind of pick up the situation, very quickly removing that sort of justice involved system from the whatever occurred. And we begin to try to understand and get more information about what has occurred that maybe has led that youth to committing that offense. But primarily what we can do is then engage family with the hopeful idea of getting the family and the young people reunified, as well as a plan that they can take forward as that charge, as things progress within that charge. The whole goal is very simple to, by providing this community-based alternative, we're hopeful that young person won't continue on in the justice cycle and the justice system. We've expanded that program into what we call our STAR program, which is strategies to actively reduce recidivism. And it's very simple as well. Inside of the court, if a juvenile court judge, as they are determining what's the next best step for a young person who may have committed a minor offense or even a certain number of less serious felonies, a juvenile court judge can refer a young person right out of court to our programs at Shelter House, where they can actually stay with us in the residential capacity for up to 21 days. And during that time, we work with the family, the court support workers, and any other providers to sort of take a full understanding of what's going on with the young people. And again, the whole goal is to bring the family back together and therefore hopefully avoiding further involvement in the justice system. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to talking with you in a few minutes.
Matt, actually, there's two questions for you real quick. How are your programs funded, and what are the number of youth served beds available for residential at Shelter House?
We have 20 beds available at Shelter House, 10 for, we have 2 dorms, boys and girls dorm. And we have up to sometimes 500 to 600 kids a year that come to our emergency shelter. We have a diverse funding stream. The YMCA is a huge partner with us as our parent organization. We receive a basic center federal grant, some local government grants. We have a couple of special events, and then we have a very active annual campaign strategy. So we have a pretty diverse funding stream.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Our next panelist is Mr. Albino Garcia. Albino, please open your video. Albino is the founder of La Placita Institute, a grassroots community organization in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that engages young people and their families in comprehensive, holistic approach to youth and community development. Albino, welcome. Please share a little more about La Placita Institute and also describe your program's connection to working with pre-adjudicated youth.
Okay, so hello everyone. Albino Garcia, Executive Director here at La Placita Institute, Albuquerque, New Mexico, South Valley. So we're a center of gravity. We consider ourselves a space-based and a place-based for space-based people with no space and a place-based people with no place. We like to say we are who we serve. So we have multi-generation system impacted people working with system impacted children. We serve all generations. We've been system impacted for frankly hundreds of years. So we believe we have a big part in the answer and solution to what ails our children who are currently headed towards the system and or involved in the system and even post system. So we consider ourselves kind of a surrogate street community, kind of grassroots old school organization, a little on the edgy side, to a lot of conservative agencies maybe, and even conservative approaches. I say that, we say we're alternative to detention programming, but even that, I see ourselves as the alternative to detention programming, because a lot of the alternative to detention programmings, are system operated, and we're not. Some of what we do here, we have several different kinds of services. One of the big things we're doing today, we're certified organic farm program. So a lot of kids, will come here, will participate in our farm program, and it's a meaningful approach. It gives them an opportunity. Many of them who might have been detained in the past have consumed food that we grow right here in the barrio, right here in the neighborhood, and it's certified organic. So today, we'll talk later a little more about how we're, adjusting to COVID and how we're able to continue our services. And one of the things that we're doing is expanding the farm program, because it's a place where, spatial distancing and activity can happen safely still. And we provide them meaningful activities. They can grow food. Some of that food is sold directly to the Youth Detention Center kitchen. So kids who are detained are consuming certified organic food grown right here in their neighborhood, which is pretty cool. We provide case management services. We're a culturally based operation, so we serve a lot of Native American, Chicano, children of color, but not exclusively. And so with that, we have a lot of cultural services. We have, curanderismo, which is traditional healing, cultural healing services. We have sweat lodges that are currently not being used because of the COVID-19, but we provide cleansing ceremonies, blessing ceremonies, grieving ceremonies for our youth, reintroduction to self-identity. We provide a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership, a safe place for them. And again, we currently do, programming for them, GED, life skills, arts, farming, and just, basic mentorship for them. More to come, but that's pretty much it for now.
Thank you, Albino. Before you go, Albino, actually, you're going to stay on. Someone wants you to speak a little bit more about the importance of Indigenous teachings in relation to your programming. Can you share a little bit more about that with the folks?
Yeah, sure. How much time do we got? No,
not that much.
All right. No,
even though it's so cool.
Wow. So, Indigenous, teachings. So we have as you know, in the subculture, a lot of the youth that we work with, they've kind of gone into a subcultural family, subcultural identities, gangs, street culture, etc. And when you break that down, you realize that the characteristics of subculture, which is something that they identify with and as, are rituals, traditions, ceremonies, symbols, protocols, and rites of passages, most of them destructive. And what we find is that our philosophy is la cultura cura. Many of you have heard it before. It means culture heals. And we find that the characteristics of culture, if they're not provided in an authentic and genuine way, they will be recreated in the street culture and in a destructive culture, in criminal culture, drug culture, gang culture. And so what we do is we have those, programs, and all of it is culturally based. It's full of rituals and ceremonies and symbols and traditions that are authentic and genuine to each culture. And it's not exclusively Indigenous, by the way. So culture is, it doesn't exclude. So more to come on that, probably not on this call, but whenever possible, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Albino. And Cassidy and Matt, you can come on back and join us with your videos. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us, each of you, a glimpse into your programming. I know we probably could do 4 hours on each program and all of the things that you guys do after talking with you all in preparation for this webinar. You're doing amazing things and there's lots of moving parts. Let's see how much we can get through in our questions. So we're gonna start with questions. We're gonna try to make this a little conversational. I wanna remind folks, if you have questions, please throw them up in the chat and we'll hopefully get to them. So we're gonna start off with utilization and a question to Matt. How has the utilization of your programming changed from the beginning of COVID-19 to date?
So I know every state, is a little bit different, but for the state of Kentucky, when we really kind of shut down as a state, and that was really about the second week in March, things got pretty eerie around here. One thing that was unlike some other organizations, we continued on. We considered ourselves first responders primarily because of our shelter. And shelter houses always serve youth, and many, as I said, a number of 500-600 kids a year. So when for the first few weeks, really into almost May, we were getting so few referrals, not only from our obviously from the schools, which were shut down, and some of our other traditional referral sources. Therefore, sometimes we were also not receiving a lot of kids through law enforcement or the court system. We were working as virtual as we could, trying to support the court and law enforcement, but it was kind of a strange time. But it was a bit of the calm before the storm. When we got into May and early summer, our referrals not only picked up, but what I really wanted to emphasize on this question was the degree of need that we were seeing with the young people, and that's across the board, not just in our alternatives program. We were seeing a significant degree of abuse and neglect going on at home. A number of kids who had been homeless and on the street for several days or weeks. And then regarding our justice programs, we weren't just getting the kids who had committed maybe shoplifting or a misdemeanor charge. We were getting kids with some higher level offenses, a lot of car theft, carjackings. So kids and young people that were hurt, were angry, were in a really, really tough space. That's continued through the summer. I would be remiss if I didn't include, I think a big part of the challenges we have faced with our young people has been the need for reform and addressing the systemic racism that does exist within our particular, our community and our justice system here. That's been as a challenge. It's also been a great opportunity, one that we've welcomed and tried to embrace since for a long time. But I do firmly believe there's some great movement that's occurring here in Louisville with systemic change. But again, I'll say, the degree of need, and not only with the young people but their families, there was a very stark difference when things started to pick back up and we opened back up. So that's just a little bit on how utilization changed.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else want to chime in about the utilization of your programs and whether it's changed between the beginning of COVID and now?
I'm happy to chime in. Some very similar things to Matt, but what really happened for us is that we saw a lot of facilities wanting to release youth. And so even though that wasn't pre-adjudicated, it was figuring out how do we kind of divert them now that this opportunity is upon us. And so in the releases, we were supporting youth to go back in the community, but we also saw a lot of facilities wanting to divert youth so their populations wouldn't raise. And so in that way, we also were ready to respond. And then what we also noticed with schools needed a lot of help with locating youth with high needs. And so we worked very closely with community schools. And those relationships really deepened as we were out there really trying to locate some of the young people who had kind of fallen off the radar. And a lot of our services switched from kind of cultivating and growing to firefighting when emergency and crisis response was much more needed, including financial response, which isn't usually the role that we play. So we pivoted to really get financial resources to support families quickly. And then finally, and I think most importantly for us, our systems change work took off because there were all these windows of opportunity. And as Matt kind of alluded to around particularly the racial justice pieces, between, now incarceration is a public health issue and now policing is a public health issue. And so all of these systems change windows opened up for us. And we had to pivot and really figure out how do we quickly build capacity while also meeting the needs of young people on the ground.
Albino, do you have anything to add regarding utilization of La Placita?
I suppose when COVID hit, and there was this good long period of kind of stay at home activity, we saw the stressors rise, and not just in the youth, right, but in the entire community. Agencies, service providers, frontline folks, and families, and so it was, everybody kind of went on shutdown and isolation, and then everybody was trying to figure out how do we make our own places and spaces safe, so that when the conversation of how do we start to bring folks back start to happen again. And in the meantime, we were really, really fortunate, again, like I mentioned in the earlier piece, that a lot of our activities are outside, they're outdoors. So it's easier to do spatial distancing, right? And so we found ourselves kind of, being one of the places in the community that was still open and available, where youth could come and we can put them on that row over there, and you start on the north side, you start on this row over here on the south side, and start to weed, right? We also found that some of the criteria was still, like, kids were wanting to know where they could do their community service requirements, right? And because all the programs, all the after-school programs, all the agencies, they kind of shut down. And then we had to figure out also what are the protocols and policies around, communication and with your clients, like the social media stuff, like where do we relax, or do we, is it appropriate to be Facebook friends with your clients now, because that's how they're communicating, and that's what's going on, right? And so, we had to look at all those policies, those needed adjustments and stuff like that. Finally, we joke about this, although it's probably not so funny to some, because of the seriousness of it, but we started doing what I call, drive-by intervention. And I shared it with you before where, I told my staff, hey, if they can't come to us, then let's take the services to them in a safe way. So, you could go to a kid driveway, park out front, and text them and say, how you doing? And at first, it's not as bad now as it was when it first started, but they were really isolated and they were really frustrated. And so when you say, step outside of your house, and then they come outside and then they see a little bag on the porch and it's got, some medicine in there. It's called Snickers bars, right? That goes a long way. That's a big medicine for kids who are isolated at home, right? Or maybe some, certified organic, food that we were able to bring to the houses. So we were doing that for a while, right? It's not so stringent now as it was when it first came up. But we started to take the programming and the activity directly to them. And I gave my staff permission as long as they were, safe and distant and all that kind of stuff. So that's how we began to kind of like shift our our work a little bit. And we have a lot more to it, but I'll save some of that for later.
Thanks, Albino. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So one for Matt. Matt, is your mentoring program unique to your YMCA, or is it a YMCA program that any YMCA can use?
So, to my knowledge, it's unique to the YMCA of Greater Louisville. I will say I have provided some sort of consulting and a little bit of a setup for some other community partners who want to replicate it. So I'm happy to, speak or set up an appointment offline or something to talk more about that. But to my knowledge, it's the Why Now mentoring is unique to the Greater Louisville YMCA.
Thank you. And then another one for you, Matt, which is, do you think the courts and law enforcement will continue to refer high-level greater needs kids as we transition to the new reality of COVID?
Oh, good, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we are going to see that for some time. Dr. Higgins mentioned some things I agree with, and that is that continuing to be a very a place that remains open and committed to doing this work. We have it, adjusted our programming and with relative success. So I would anticipate continuing to see those referrals. I think the challenge will be being able to maintain and a commitment to doing the programming right and safety. I know we're going to talk probably later about some financial challenges. We've certainly been challenged financially, and that's impacted our staff structure. So it'll be a balance between those particular influences.
Thank you so much. If I haven't gotten to your question, I'm trying to intersperse. So we'll go to the next one, and then I'll grab some more questions off the chat. So Albino, has your actual program model changed as a result of COVID-19? What are you hearing from young people and families, and how have you adjusted your work to be responsive?
Yeah, so I kind of touched base a little bit on that, in the last two comments.
Yeah.
And, so I think being responsive to the families, again, as a response to COVID, we kind of seized on, for instance, the garden, sales. We were, selling the food, the certified organic food that we were growing. It became much more of a programmatic approach than it did, say, a production piece. It became, a way to help with the stressors initially. With folks were scared to go shopping because they thought they might catch COVID by going to the supermarkets or going to get food and stuff like that. So most of my funders were cool with us, adjusting, how we were going to use the resources. So we started to turn the food production into more detailed programmatic service program, as well as a food and nutrition, and also a way for them to limit having to go shopping for certain kinds of foods, especially vegetables and fruits and things like that. So we were able to change that. We are again, expanding it to a space and place where outside activities are much more the program than they were before. Inside, not having a lot of enclosed environment type activity. So we're fortunate as far as that's concerned. We have other partners in Albuquerque who don't have that luxury. And so then they've been turning to us and sending us their youth as well. And again, you got to reinforce that. You got to supervise that. And so, it's been keeping us pretty busy, actually. We're pretty busy here with those kinds of activities.
Yeah. How many youth are involved in La Placita? on any given day?
It depends. I suppose there's certain youth here who are here not daily, and then there are those who are here daily. We have a GED program, which is also related to the farm program. The prerequisite has to go that. So that we have on a daily basis anywhere from 10 to 15 throughout the varied programs, which would include case management services, some of the life skills, farming, and we have a conservation core program agreement here too.
One thing I might add to that question is, the idea that we have become sort of our own virtual school site. Typically, our kids that stay in our shelter are able to go to their home school within our school district, and we continue to be online, and we use what's called the NTI model. And so training staff and incorporating that idea that our kids would not be going off to school during the day, that stay in our shelter, was a big change, and at first a challenge for our program. I happen to see a question pop in, and I'll just throw in, one of the ways we've kept volunteers engaged has been to get them involved in that sort of the daily monitoring and support that's been very critical for students as they've navigated online school. So there's been some others, but I wanted to point that out. That's been a very one of the bright spots with our engaging our volunteers.
Thanks, Matt. Cassidy, do you have anything to add? I know you work with a lot of volunteers and a lot of and kids at the same time. Anything you want to add around any of that?
The thing that I will add is that before COVID hit, we had really been pushing a culture of innovation and human-centered design, and I was incredibly grateful that we had really mobilized our staff in that way before, because when we needed to pivot all of our services and to be virtual, it really required us to very quickly reimagine curriculum delivery and pro-social events, and we really took the lead of our staff, who had the best pulse on the ground. And so had we not kind of really nurtured that culture of innovation, I think there would have been a lot more bumps, and it was still tough and we're exhausted, but I think it helped set us up. And I think that that's also our style of engaging volunteers and being creative and really mobilizing the community through that human-centered design piece. And so people were already somewhat used to informing how we did the work. And so it was really helpful to have all hands on deck as we were figuring this out.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask a couple of questions from the panelists here. Let me go up a little bit. There's lots of questions. That's so great. Let's see. How have you, for anyone, how have you integrated or added social media vehicles into your programming models? What platforms are you using? Anybody can jump in.
Okay, well, I kind of mentioned that probably the primary one right now is Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. That's like the main one. We're able to, for instance, put out, so we have 3 different food distributions going on throughout the week here at La Placita. Wednesday is our biggest one. And that's also a collaboration with other growers and other, food distribution programs that we're all uniting on. So that one gives about, 70 boxes of food out on Wednesdays. And then we have our own food that we grow that goes with those boxes. And that's the certified organic parcels. And then we have, local corporate groups that are helping us, like Costco. So every Friday, Costco gives us a bunch of food, and then we give that out. We're able to communicate that with the entire community, especially the youth and the families that we serve. So all of them are getting, a variety of food weekly. And the kids who are attending our program are the ones that get to disperse the food. They package it. They not only grow it, they package it, they process it, through our processing kitchen, set it up, and then they get to check off everybody who comes through the parking lot to pick up their food. And that's how we're able to do that. Primarily for us, it's Facebook.
Thanks. Anybody use any other platforms that they want to share? We're getting amazing questions.
I would say we need to do better. We realized that some of the best people to help us with a social media strategy actually are the young people that we serve. And that really came from our mentoring program. That became an activity that a lot of the mentors in the youth did. They're a part of a closed social media group, but we convened a group and began to learn a little bit about how to have a more impactful presence beyond Facebook and Twitter to some of the other social media platforms. But I'd say that's definitely a work in progress for us.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask, someone is asking a question. Many of you are speaking to how you adjusted serving youth already engaged or knowledgeable of your programming. They want to know how you facilitated serving new youth when referral sources like courts, schools, et cetera, aren't forward-facing with youth as much as pre-COVID.
I'll say real quick,
I
have my outreach teams participate, and we're very willing and wanting to do so in a lot of the protests that have been active in Louisville, and a number of young people for that very reason. With our staff shirts on, we had a bit of a dual purpose, and a number of young people were brought to our shelter as a result of that. The other sort of on the other side of the coin, we have strengthened our relationship and our outreach and communications with law enforcement. That's a sensitive topic here, but recognizing that they need to make sure they know how to get young people to us. So participation in both the protests and some of the social unrest, but also really talking regularly to the folks at law enforcement has been important.
Thank you, Matt. Albino or Cassidy, do you want to jump in on this question about being able to serve new youth coming in and where they come from when the referral sources are not working?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question, because I think there was an assumption early on that we were closed down, and so then we had to recuperate, that to say, we early on we got a PPE grant, payroll protection, so we were able to keep our staff employed, right? And not only that, we got a lot of these emergency COVID response funds, small ones here and there, and we were able to kind of retrofit all of our spaces and places pretty early on. But the assumption was that everything was closed down and nothing was open for the youth or the community. And so it did take some recuperating and some information. But once folks realized that we were still some open for business, and it was slightly different, there was some protocols, testing protocols, this, that, all that kind of stuff, signage and various kinds of things available for the population. Once we got all that said, now we kind of we're at kind of capacity a little bit, because we can only serve so many at the same time, still trying to maintain. COVID ain't going away right now here. It's still strong and alive. And so, we're just kind of creating and sustaining as best as we can that we have. As far as others, knowing about us, some of our partner organizations here that are some of the shelters and the RTCs locally, we're still working with them more virtually staying in touch. Those that might exit those programs know that we're available, but we haven't gone any further than that.
Thank you. Thanks, Albino. Cassidy, do you have anything to add?
No, we really take our referrals directly from education and juvenile justice systems. And so those stayed strong. What we discovered is it was really tough to keep youth engaged who actually had been participating in programs because they were really bought into the in-person part of it. And the new referrals were easier to engage virtually. And so this just setting expectations for young people has been probably the challenge, but the referral flow has luckily been consistent.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question about funding now, and then I was hoping that maybe we could do a lightning round after that since we have 15 minutes left. And for those of you who are asking questions that we're not getting to, Beth, would it be possible for us to grab those questions off the chat and we'll put them in the discussion on JDAIconnect so that we can answer those questions?
Absolutely. Anything's possible.
Thank you very much. Okay. So Cassidy, how have you worked with your funders during this time? Has program funding changed as a result of COVID-19? And do you anticipate any changes in funding going forward?
Yeah, so two of the first things we did was adapt our programming and then also reach out and assess what we needed to do on a funding side to sustain ourselves. Most of our funding comes from the government, so both local county funding and also state funding, along with some foundation individual donors. And how we worked with funders after COVID hit was we immediately reached out with things like memos, phone calls to really update our funders on what our service modifications were and any asks we had around adjusting the budget given the unpredictability of the environment we were moving in. A lot of our government funding, particularly our local funding, was fee for service. And so we were getting paid for each service we were giving. And with that being so unpredictable, we really pushed on getting those contracts transitioned to cost reimbursement so that we could be more flexible and responsive to what was going on, since it was harder to be prescriptive about what services young people and their families might need. And how this was received is funders were really understanding and responsive. And so we were able to negotiate more stabilized funding structures, contract structures to deal with the uncertain future. And the added benefit is that we also were able to support other CBOs in our community because we were really pushing these shifts. And so our funders then kind of changed the way they were even doing contracts for more than just Fly. Which we were really grateful to be able to contribute to the CBO community in that way. And really the things top of mind that worked well is that partnership and reputation were really central for us to lean into those conversations. And then what I anticipate in terms of how funding might shift, I think that foundation and government priorities will shift. And everything I would be hearing is that we're not going to know that now, but probably a year from now, where it's going to get clear on what shifts might happen. And I really think it's vital for programs to be grounded in community responsiveness, to still remain true to what our mission, values, and vision are, but really being flexible so that we can adapt and innovate as needed while maintaining those core aspects of our model.
Yes, absolutely. Matt, what's your perspective on funding? I know you've had a little bit of a different experience.
Sure. That's a tough one to respond to, Cassie. I was trying to take some notes. That was a great response. It has been challenging for a number of reasons. The YMCA has been devastated by the pandemic. Gyms and workout facilities. Our membership base has been probably some of the last things that will return to normal. We had to cancel our largest fundraising events, and so we've done a couple of things. First, I would, as a recommendation, going back to volunteers, try to find, if you can find some experts that are volunteers sort of in the banking industry or folks that could help you understand the CARES Act itself and the opportunity to, for funding. That was a breakthrough for the YMCA in not that they had that knowledge base, but they engaged some volunteers to help with that. There certainly has been some funding opportunities through grant partnerships, either current or new ones that we have pursued. And the last thing I would say is a shift that we're seeing here in Louisville is, and this is as a result of the pandemic, but very directly, guess, indirect of the pandemic, but very important to say that a lot of the funding opportunities that in looking forward will want organizations to be a part of systemic change. Just to be very clear, I think that is something that will really help drive the bus when it comes to funding. If you as an organization are not only direct service providers, but your role in creating some systemic change, I think, will be very important in the future.
Thanks, Matt. And someone just asked a question about race equity that maybe we'll be able to get to. But before we do, Albino, is there anything else you want to add about funding during this time or going forward?
Well, I feel fortunate, to be honest, in an unfortunate time. We're probably 75-80% funded through foundations, and those foundations, they were not only flexible with us during this time, they offered emergency response funding, and so we were able to recuperate that. We did take a hit from a government health contract by 2 positions, but we were able to recuperate that through the flexibility and the additional resources we got from the philanthropic community. So that was a plus for us. And then we have one juvenile justice contract with the county, and the invoicing, they're very supportive and flexible with us on that, so it didn't take a hit. We didn't take a hit there. So we're kind of sitting in a bit of a, we feel, like we're counting our blessings right now. The other thing was that some of the funding, some of my resources allowed for early disbursement, 21 disbursement coming here in the fall. So that, and then we'll have to see how we sustain the rest of 21. But, we've been okay to get some early disbursement.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Rather than doing the lightning round, I think we're going to go to this race equity question. So the question asked is, one of the challenges that we face is getting professionals to deal with racism and anti-racism orientation for many providers. How do you address the race equity in programs that are guilty of net widening? Frequently, professionals give an overview of their services without disclosing the reduction of red issues. How is that addressed within your prospective program? So maybe we could talk a little bit about how you all are addressing the race equity question in your programs. Matt, do you want to start? I see you.
Sure. It's certainly something that will continue. It's we have. I mentioned a little bit about our involvement on the street level. We're having conversations every day, not just with our youth, but with our staff. We have a very diverse staff team, and that's a great thing for a number of reasons. I'll say one of the things that comes up often is this. Maybe a lot of our law enforcement officers that bring kids to us do it in a wonderful way. They are supportive. They are bringing kids and they are not increasing charges, and so it's presented a bit of a what we see and hear in the news is not necessarily what we've experienced in our daily programming, and that's been a source of daily conversations, informally and formal conversations, on a weekly basis. Most of my entire staff sat around and watched the announcement of the Breonna Taylor grand jury case, and it was very challenging, but it was also the right place to be, not only for us, but primarily for our young people. And again, I think that we still have a long way to go, but a commitment from the from the top down to continue the work.
Thank you, Matt. Albino or Cassidy, do you want to jump in with some of the work you're doing inside your organization or outside with others to reduce net widening?
So yeah, I'll just say that we've been working over a decade very intensely on reducing race and ethnic disparity, and what's happened more recently with that is as a larger community, we've been able to reduce, detention and so forth, but the numbers of detention, but we really haven't had an impact on reducing, the race of the population who are mostly impacted. And so, when the national narrative went, and you all have probably heard what happened when, when they started to take down the images and the symbols, of colonization here, and someone came out and actually shot one of the protesters here in Albuquerque, and the lack of attention post that event, it went away. And so, the work is still to be done in the youth, spectrum here in New Mexico, and in the justice spectrum. We talk about it, but we haven't really had any major policy changes yet. We haven't addressed it with any long-standing impact. There's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of committees, there's a lot of groups who have been forming and dealing and talking about it for a long time, but we haven't really pushed the needle as far as the race of the children and the families who are system impacted. So I'd like to paint a prettier picture, but it is what the reality is here. I think people want to do it, but collectively we still don't know how. System doesn't know how, and some of the community and the system cannot get along good enough to be able to address these issues. So again, not to be all doom and gloom. We're talking about it, we're organizing on it, but we haven't pushed it yet. I mean, there hasn't been a big shift in the impact. The greatest number of system impacted people, children, and families are people of color.
Thank you, Albino. And Cassidy, do you have anything to add on this particular topic?
Yeah, I'll add a few quick things. At FLY, we've been doing diversity and equity and inclusion work for the past 4 years. And so designing really intentional blueprints around how we're first taking an internal look at our organization and figuring out what we need to shift, which has set us up to really be prepared in a lot of the systems change pieces that have come up. But the other thing we've really been doing is we've been redesigning several of our program models to intentionally disrupt the pipeline to prison, with the North Star being to build agency and self-advocacy with our youth and really centering their voice and partnering with them essentially to disrupt that pipeline. And so, for example, in one of our counties, one of our models was called on by the county to reduce racial and ethnic disparity for Black youth in a deferred entry of judgment program. And the failure rate started out as 87% failure for technical violations, so essentially kids acting like kids. And when we used our court-appointed friend and advocate model, we were able to turn that into a 100% success rate for those young people. And so really focusing on how do you not just help a young person as an individual, but really build a program model that's meant to disrupt the system that is broken and creating this influx of young people of color being sucked into the system to begin with.
Amazing, amazing. I am sad that our time is drawing to a close. It is 3 o'clock. Please join me, everyone, in thanking our fantastic presenters, Cassidy Higgins, Matt Reed, and Albino Garcia, for their time and for this great conversation today. Thank you to everyone who's participated with questions. Amazing. A recording of this webinar will be posted on JDAIconnect. Also, remember to join us there to continue the conversation. We hope that you've enjoyed this time. Maybe you've learned something, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Just real quickly, once they close out of here, they're going to get a brief evaluation. If they could just fill that out, that would be helpful in planning future events. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, everybody.